Nostalgia has a funny way of warping how we remember the past. Slip on those rose-tinted glasses, and suddenly, all of the headaches of old car ownership vanish, replaced by the good old days glow. Every era of motoring has its pros and cons, but there's one period that, despite its shortcomings, just seemed to get it right. The 2000s was an incredible, revolutionary, and outright insane era for car enthusiasts, full of bizarre but brilliant creations. The Germans decided the number one requirement for the school run was a V10. The French insisted that the Clio needed a mid-mounted V6, and Japan developed 400 horsepower 2-litre saloons that nipped at the heels of Lamborghinis. But it wasn't just big engines and big power that made the 2000s so special. If you've clicked on this video, you probably feel that same sense of warmth towards the 2000s. But what exactly was it that made this era so special? When I asked myself this question, the first thing that came to mind was balance. The car industry progressed immensely throughout the 90s, another incredible era for cars. Japan came onto the scene and revolutionised the supercar with the NSX.
Our dreams come true. NSX. Honda.
They showed the world that supercars didn't have to be useless, unreliable death traps, and this raised the bar dramatically. Hot hatches made fast cars more accessible to the masses, and technology began making cars last longer, go faster, and do it all more efficiently than ever before. But despite this, cars still maintained this balance, a perfect harmony between tech and an analog, raw experience. I won't be the first or the last to talk about this, but modern cars have tipped the scales way too far in the tech direction. Not only losing that old school analog feeling that we love, but the simplicity has been lost too. So many of us have made our best memories working on cars with our friends. It's one of the greatest things about our passion. But this is almost impossible with modern cars to the average enthusiast. On paper, performance cars are better than ever, but with a mixture of tech, constant heckling from safety beeps, and a lack of simplicity, we've strayed far from the perfect harmony we saw in the 2000s. Now, the subject of modern cars having too much tech is a very tired topic, but I did have to discuss it when comparing old versus new. Next on our list of reasons the 2000s was so great for cars is design. Design can make or break a car. We lust for cars we can not only enjoy driving, but also park up, turn around, and stare at longingly in awe. It's one of the reasons we cut Alfa Romeo so much slack for making shit cars. It's a fine art with a significant element of subjectivity involved. My beautiful may not be yours, but that doesn't stop us from forming a general consensus on whether a car is ugly or not. Modern design hasn't necessarily become ugly, just more fussy. We see some very striking, pretty, sometimes divisive designs in the contemporary car market. But something designs often lack in the modern performance car world is restraint. Modern performance variants have become far more cluttered and fussy than their older brothers. This is due to a wide array of factors which often benefit the car, like safety and advancements in aerodynamics, but is also done for some less favourable reasons. One of those reasons being the rise in social media flexing. This need to buy and show off more and more expensive possessions has driven interest in owning expensive upmarket performance cars, even to those with little interest in the performance, just the image the car brings them. This sort of customer understandably prefers a more flashy and in-your-face design. The M3 has to look dramatically different to the 3 Series to interest this kind of buyer. The E46 from the 2000s had the room to be more of a if you know sort of car. It was subtly different but also blended in. One of those cars that if you were in the know, you'd be excited to see on the road, but to others, it may have just looked like another 3 Series. The E46 and many other designs of this era bring us right back to that word, balance. They looked menacing and special, but unassuming, like they didn't need to shout in the face of the peasants about how fast or rich they are. The timeless design and shape spoke for itself. This all led to some beautiful and simplistic silhouettes that you don't often see anymore. BMW have been one of the major culprits for this overdone design language. I must admit, I hated the G80 when it came out, but the look has grown on me slightly. I'd be stretched to say I love it, but they do have a strong presence on the road. Perhaps this idea that cars look better in the 2000s is simply an illusion created by familiarity. This is a well-documented phenomenon called the mere exposure effect. We become more and more fond of things from an aesthetic standpoint the more we're exposed to them. Time will tell on this one, but I can't help but feel like the 2000s just did it better. Moving on to our next reason, we have the environment. Perhaps wrongfully, the 2000s was an era where no one, at least in car production, really gave a shit about the environment. And while this polar bear killing attitude wasn't exactly ideal, it did spawn some of the most iconic cars the world has ever seen. What did a four-door practical saloon, perfect for the school run, really need most before anything else? A V10, of course. Audi and Mercedes lost their minds too. The Q7 got a V12 diesel, and what better way to show off its immense unnecessary torque than to tow a commercial jet with it? Audi shoved V10s and 12s into all sorts. Mercedes joined in too. This did produce a lot of cars with eye-watering maintenance costs. But who cared when your family saloon sounded and went like a Lambo? And while these cars were far from perfect, that screw-loose attitude just gave them that extra bit of personality that a lot of modern cars are missing today. Japan wasn't as fond of these high-displacement engines. They preferred to make huge power from a massive turbo with a tiny engine bolted to it. These turbo engines were laggier than dial-up internet, but this did make for a whole lot of fun. Jeremy Clarkson once famously raced a 1.6 Fiat Stilo against a 400 horsepower Evo that he just used to embarrass a Lamborghini Murcielago on track. Except in this race, he ran both cars from a roll in their highest gear and lost. Obviously the Evo is faster in the correct gear, but this demonstrated just how long it took that turbo to get going if you didn't work with it. Modern cars don't tend to have this problem, which is great, but turbo engines from this era brought so much more theatre and drama to the experience. And I'm not really into the idea that every imperfection a car has should be romanticised as character. A sloppy gearbox or vague steering rack doesn't magically make a car more soulful, but I do think certain quirks like turbo lag can actually add to the experience. It's not about pretending that flaws are virtues, it's about recognising when something that isn't perfect on paper can still make the car more engaging in practice. As a side note, it's also worthy of mention that we don't even get the Evo anymore, or its rival the STI. Mitsubishi's fall-off was a topic for a whole video of its own. Another less likely contributor to this magical era of cars was the video game industry, and more specifically, racing games. I knew this era was good, but it wasn't until I sat down to write this script and realised that the list of brilliant racing games released in the 2000s was far too long to even read off in this video. Need for Speed Underground 1, Underground 2, Most Wanted, Carbon, Midnight Club LA, Forza 3, Gran Turismo 4, Test Drive Unlimited, to name just a few. There was a huge number of great titles when we compare how many we've seen thus far in the 2020s. In the same way that the release of Fast and Furious massively influenced our love for certain cars, so did this golden era of racing games. We have fond memories attached to these cars, not only of their real-life versions, but after using them in these games. Despite the Porsche 996 shape being generally considered one of the ugliest, the 996 Turbo is still one of my favourite shapes, and I have a strong suspicion it's because it was one of the coolest cars in Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. How many of us fell in love with the E46 M3 just because of Need for Speed Most Wanted, or lusted over the soon-to-arrive Audi R8 concept in Carbon? The fact that these games were great didn't directly influence how good or bad these cars were during this period, but they did influence our feelings about these cars and are likely huge contributing factors to our warm feelings towards the era. Now this might all sound a bit bleak, but the upside is that many of these cars are now far more affordable than they were new, and there's still plenty of them around. The more we keep the passion alive, the longer these machines will stick around too. So do the world a favour, go out there and make a gloriously poor financial decision.